Welcome to Avaya University and our Breaking Free from Abandonment and Betrayal curriculum. I'm Mike Allen, and this is my partner, Ande Anderson. We're the founders of Avaya and the online communities, A Course in Miracles Village and Enlightenment Village.
Today's teaching from Avaya University and Michelle Chalfant is about transforming abandonment and betrayal with the adult chair. You will discover what the adult chair model is and how it can help you heal from abandonment and betrayal. You'll discover how the connection with your inner child helps you heal while your adolescent part keeps you stuck, and how to rebuild trust after abandonment or betrayal. All these insights and more are in this powerful teaching from Avaya University and Michelle Chalfant. We hope you enjoy, apply these insights in your life, and share them with your friends and family.
And from all of us at Avaya, enjoy your journey, and thanks for allowing us to be part of it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Breaking Free from Abandonment and Betrayal. I am your co-host, Ande Anderson. I am the co-founder of Avaya Media and Enlightenment Village with my partner, Ike Allen. Thanks so much for joining us again. And in this event, as you know, we are talking with therapists. We're talking with doctors, with authors, with relationship experts, and they are sharing with us their tools and strategies to help us let go of our experiences of abandonment and betrayal so that we can live peaceful, powerful lives and ultimately have really healthy, happy relationships with ourselves and others. So today our guest is going to talk about transforming abandonment and betrayal with the adult chair. So please welcome Michelle Chalfant. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Ande. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for being here. And I want to tell everyone a little bit about you before we dive into some questions. Like The first question is going to be, what is the adult chair, right? So that's obviously hanging over everyone's head right now. But Michelle is a therapist. She's a holistic life coach, an author, speaker, and podcaster. And she's the founder of the adult chair model of self-realization and self-love. She is passionate about stripping away our masks and finding and uncovering our true self. Michelle can help change lives with her weekly podcast, which is called The Adult Chair. And her work with The Adult Chair has helped tens of thousands of people across the world improve their lives and their relationships, leading to greater peace and emotional balance. So let's dive in, Michelle. What is this adult chair model?
Wow. Okay. So the adult chair is a culmination really of, I would say, maybe 20 years of all of my learning and reading and multiple certifications and just about everything, because I wanted to learn how to love myself. I grew up with lots of really dark, negative, ruminating thoughts about myself, that I'm so bad, I hate myself, what's wrong with me? And I just started this quest. I think probably when I was 18, I started taking classes and reading and going, of course, getting college educated and getting my master's and becoming a therapist. And about 10 years ago, after moving to Nashville, Tennessee, I had met a mentor here, or another mentor of mine. I had many. And through my relationship with her and some training with her, that's where this whole model came from, is really part of working with this teacher, where she introduced a lot of this work to me. So the adult chair is based on 3 different aspects of our lives. So it's very simple. We've got the first stage of our lives. We all are children. So we call that the child chair. So that's 0 to 6 years old. And many people would relate to this as the inner child. The second part of our lives is the adolescent phase. So I call that the adolescent chair. That's when we live in this chair, and it's pre-adolescence, adolescence to post-adolescence. That goes from about 7 to age 25 years old. And then if we had healthy parenting and modeling on how to live healthy, then we quite easily move into what I call the adult chair. And that's where we're compassionate. We live in the present moment. We're conscious. We live with fact and truth instead of stories and assumptions. And unfortunately, most of us don't land here. We land in adulthood, but from the consciousness of this adolescent chair part. So physically, I look like I'm an adult, but emotionally speaking, I'm reacting. I'm living in the future and the past, making up stories and assumptions. So I don't get out of that adolescent phase of our lives, mentally and emotionally speaking. So this whole model is to teach people, how do we live as the healthiest version of ourselves, which is the adult chair, and living in our healthy adult. That's a very long explanation, but that's what it is. And it really teaches us how to love ourselves and transform just about anything.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
purposely didn't look that up before I before I interviewed you, because I want to know, I want to hear it straight from Michelle. So awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So how does this model that you've come up with, right, the adult share, how does this help people, our listeners today, who might be dealing with some abandonment issues from their past, with betrayals in their life, that kind of stuff? How can that help them?
Yeah, with this model, again, you can plug anything in. And of course, we can plug in abandonment and betrayal. And it breaks it down and gives us tools. So, what I would do with abandonment and betrayal, I would first start out with, you know, grieving for sure. I mean, when something like that happens, it's a shock and we go into grief. But I have a lot of clients because I have a private practice, and I have clients, of course, that have had betrayals. I have as well. I have had abandonment. I have had betrayals in my life, and one just very recently, actually, again. And what I notice that I do now versus what I did in the past, and what I see a lot of my clients do, is they want to shove it away. They're stuck in anger. They don't know what to do. They cannot move on. Where with this model, we would go into grief, acknowledging what happened, really looking at it and allowing ourselves to be not just angry, of course, go through that anger, but then we'd look at what's underneath the anger. Well, there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of pain, and there are some stages and steps that I would take people through. We'd go through the grief. We'd go through responsibility. What part did I have in all of this? And again, I don't push this on anybody. It's all about, when it's time for that particular person. I think everyone goes through this. I don't think one person, it will take a week and the next step will take 2 weeks. I think it's different for every person. We really want to honor where that person is. But what this model would do is it keeps you in the present moment with everything that's happening. And when we fall into that victim place, or when we fall into that blame place, I let people go there for a while, and then I'm like, okay, let's bring it back to center. Let's bring it back into the adult. Let's connect to that inner child where we're dealing with, what's coming up emotionally speaking. So this model just offers a lot of tools and stages of, the processing of emotions and different events that happen in our lives. And when we can understand that there are different stages, and that the inner child is all about our emotions, and the adolescent is the part of us that's blaming, it just starts making sense with people. And then we go, okay, so what would you do if you're a healthy adult? Like, what would that look like? And people go, oh my gosh, I don't know.
Right.
So it outlines like what a healthy adult might do during an abandonment or a betrayal.
Got it. I love that you pull people out of the victim mentality, because that's something that, we talk a lot about at Avaya, my partner Ike and I, and we bring up on a lot of these conferences, because it definitely occurs, like it can be pretty dangerous to really identify as a victim. Well, of course, right. It's not going to leave you living like this powerful, amazing life if, right, my dad left me when I was age whatever, or he cheated on me 10 years ago or whatever. It's like, yeah, living in that same, victim mentality it can be easy and enticing to dive into occasionally, right? But
Right.
yeah, what's your experience with that? Like helping people get up out of that space?
Well, and I think too, when we're in that victim seat, and that's part of, again, our adolescent, is the adolescent share is based in ego. That's the egoic part of us. So it's based in fear. It's here to keep us alive and safe.
Mm-hmm.
So it latches on to the victim. And with the victim, when we are in the victim seat, we get a lot of attention, and people go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. How did that happen to you? He's such a jerk, or she's so mean for doing that. Oh, and so we get that. It's attention, but it's negative attention,
Mm-hmm.
So what was your question? How do I help people out of that?
Yeah, exactly.
First of all, they have to identify that they're in it.
Got it.
And so many of us, again, when we're in this adolescent share, it's the seat of the unconsciousness. So it's a very reactionary place. We fall into it. We don't know it. And in my office, I actually have 3 chairs. I have a child chair, an adolescent chair, and an adult chair. And physically speaking, or experientially speaking, I'll put them in that adolescent chair, and I'm like, sit there, what's going on with you? And they'll go into their story and their assumption. Well, he or she did this and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, how does that feel? They're like, it doesn't feel really good. And ultimately we'll boil it down to, it's really kind of victim-y. I'm like, okay, that's okay. There's no blame. I never judge people. And then I have them move into their adult, and I'll say, and there's a different energy in the adult chair. I'll say, okay, leave the victim there. What happens in your adult? And they'll go, well, I don't like this. I don't want to do that anymore. And I'm like, yeah, like that's where our empowerment sits, is in our adult. Okay, we have to make that choice. And from our healthy adult, we can make a choice out of that victim. But if we don't know that we're in there, we get stuck in there, and the brain just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. So
Right.
yeah. So, physically changing seats really helps people in the mind, at least, snap out of that seat, that I have found.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Thank you. Yeah, I love the
Yeah.
physical representation, something that they can, right, actually experience out here that's tangible that, can help us, move move into the next chair. So,
And I always ask them, what are you gaining, of course, from being in that victim seat? Like,
mm,
what are you gaining? Well, I'm gaining, and they don't want to, well, I'm not gaining anything. He did this to me or she did this to me. I'm like, no, no, no. I understand that you fell in this place, but you've been there quite a while now, and
yeah.
if I've seen someone, let's say after a month or a year or whatever of a betrayal, and they're so stuck, and I'm like, you're gaining something, let's go there. And that helps to loosen them out of that victim mentality as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you. Abandonment is something I've definitely struggled with in my life over the years. And there's been a lot of stories like playing in my adolescent share over the years around abandonment and my parents divorcing and boyfriends and all this kind of stuff. But I know there's a lot of like different kinds of abandonment, right? We can have like physical abandonment, and then there can be all these, you could have never been physically left in your life, but there's still abandonment. So like, I'd love to dive into, since I know you talk a lot about like emotions and emotional balance, like what other kinds of abandonment do you see people experiencing or what they experienced as a child?
Well, for sure, as a child, like you were saying, when parents get a divorce, little kid brains, it's hard because adults will come in, of course, and they judge themselves for why they still feel abandoned when they were little kids and their parents got a divorce and the father moved away or the mother moved away or whatever it is. I'm like, but as a little kid, we don't understand. And we do feel like, excuse me, we were abandoned versus mommy and daddy got a divorce because they weren't not in love anymore, et cetera, et cetera. But as far as different kinds of abandonment, there's that kind of abandonment. There's the abandonment I find that even parents feel like when a child goes off to college. There's the abandonment of, you know, somebody at work or you get fired out of the blue and you don't understand why. Of course, we have the classics that everybody thinks about, like my spouse cheated on me, my girlfriend, boyfriend cheated on me. I've had some business associates completely out of left field just turn on me, and it is blindsiding. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
There's so many different kinds of abandonment. You can have a little kid on the playground and all the kids run away from them, and in that moment they feel abandoned. So it happens at all stages in our lives, and they're all different kinds of abandonment that happen.
Yeah, I just like to ask that question because I think there might be people watching right now that maybe you didn't have some major event in your life. Or we're doing this event in partnership with our with co-host Mary Mercier, and she had, she was adopted and she had lots of, her mother committed suicide and all this stuff. So she had a lot of like physical abandonment issues. But there's definitely people I would imagine watching right now who maybe you didn't have this traumatic childhood or something, but like there was an emotional abandonment, or like your friends who were your best friends were all of a sudden not your best friends, and so there's many things that can affect us along the journey.
And again, if you had, let's say, a best friend, you were 10 years old and it was your next door neighbor, let's just pretend, and then that neighbor had to move away, you're now as an adult going, I don't have abandonment issues, but when we dive down into it, we find, well, my best friend moved away, I was 10 and it devastated me. And there is an abandonment wound there, but we're not even conscious of it.
Right.
Or, again, like I said, as a little kid, if a grandparent dies, we might feel abandoned by that grandparent because we don't understand death. But yet we're carrying that wound around and we don't even know it because it sits in the unconscious mind.
So that actually leads me to my next question, right? You do a lot of work with the inner child and connecting with the inner child. So why is it important for us to connect with that inner child to help us heal?
That's the key for everything, in my opinion, that I have found after all these years is the inner child is responsible for our feelings. That's where our feelings come from. That's where our true emotional needs come from. We all have needs. We have food, shelter, water to keep ourselves alive, but we have emotional needs like, I need a hug. I need you to explain this to me. I need you to give me a kiss. I need you to tell me it's going to be okay. But that inner child part, if we've been abandoned or betrayed, abandonment is a feeling, it's a true emotion. In order to move beyond the abandonment feeling or the betrayal, we've got to squarely sit in it. We've got to look at it and be in it. And that's the kind of work that I would do with the inner child. I'd say, okay, again, if you're in my office, I'd say, sit in your child chair. And again, if someone's listening to this and you're not sitting with me in my office, you can do this at home. You can sit on a couch and go, okay, there's a chair over here. Let me go sit in my chair. And again, you don't even have to use the chairs. You just do it all in your mind. But like, okay, so what does my inner child, like, what do I really feel about this? I find that as humans, when we have these devastating emotions that come up, we run from them. We have a glass of wine instead. We have a chocolate cake instead. We do everything instead of feeling what's really going on. And we cannot heal what we will not feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember hearing many, many years ago, oh my God, what's her name? Jill Bolte Taylor, the one that had the stroke.
Yes.
Wrote a Stroke of Genius.
Mm-hmm.
I swear I heard her say on there that when we are not in resistant of an emotion, we only feel that emotion for about 90 seconds.
Got it.
But what happens is the emotion rises up and the brain kicks in with a story or an assumption, and it keeps doing this. So the emotion's rising up, the brain does this. So that's what keeps our emotions stuck. If you think about it, if someone's been abandoned or betrayed or anything, gosh, the emotion starts coming up. It feels bad. When that inner child is pushing that emotion up, that adolescent, the egoic part says, I don't want to feel that. How do I stop this? Let me figure it out. So that's why we go into these stories and assumptions. So working with that inner child, it helps us to let these emotions come through us and get really clear about what we really are feeling. And what happens is, let's say we feel abandoned. So I help the person feel their abandonment. And oftentimes it's just about sitting on my couch, putting your feet on the floor, feeling grounded, letting the couch support you. Close your eyes. Where do you feel it in your body? What's happening? And I just am with them in it, and I let them feel that abandonment, and it washes through them. And they may not even know what the word abandonment is, or that it's that. I'll say, where do you feel it in your body? And they'll say, I have a knot in my stomach, or I have a knot in my throat, or my shoulders are tense. I'll say, okay, let's be in that. Mm-hmm. So we really have to be in these, whether they're physical feelings or emotions that are coming up through. I'm going to say 100% of the time, they wash through us. I've never had anyone go, it's not moving. I'll say, we're going to sit a little bit longer then. And they wash through. And then a new emotion rises up. And then another one will rise up. And then all of a sudden they're sitting in peace. And they're like, how did that happen so fast? I'm like, because you let it come up through you. And we have a new truth that rises up. So this is all the work that I do with the inner child. The inner child is so key. And so many of us do not know how to feel our emotions. And that's why we get stuck in these emotions and cannot move on. And we get stuck going back to our victim chair,
Mm-hmm.
So
I love all that. First of all, that's awesome stuff. So, one of the things that comes up for me is, okay, let's say that you do feel stuck and you're having this moment of feeling this abandonment that happened 30 years ago. And it's, let's say, affecting you in your current relationship or something. Oftentimes, right, that adolescent mind chimes in, that egoic mind is like, telling you all sorts of not helpful things and keeping you stuck. So what do you suggest for people who are like stuck in that, right? Like their mind is just shining away and they're like, I know, but Michelle told me to feel my emotions so I can, right? So how do you deal with like that moment, that I think a lot of us get stuck in?
Yeah. Great question. I, again, invite people to turn toward it. So if they have that mind that's going, ruminating, going on and on and on, again, what do we normally do if we're having that ruminating mind? We call a friend, we bitch to a friend, we have a glass of wine, we do this, we go shopping, we do all of these things to try to distract the mind. But instead, what we want to do is turn toward that emotion. And we want to turn toward the part of us that's having all the ruminating thoughts. So what I invite people to do, so in the adolescent chair, we have many, 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 many different parts. One part is the victim, but we have the inner critic, the inner perfectionist, the et cetera, right? So I'll say to them, okay, the louder and faster that the voice is going through your mind, the more attention it wants from you and the more you turn away. Think about a little kid that wants your attention. Think about like a 3 or a 5-year-old. They're going, mommy, 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 mommy. And what do? We're like, enough, wait, or okay, yeah, in a minute. And what happens? The kid gets louder, 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 louder. So I just did this yesterday with a client who had a lot of anxiety. And I said, turn toward that voice. What is that voice saying? That part of you, it's one part, it's not all of you. And when we turn toward that voice, we can give it an image. So I'll say to people, if they're visual, not everyone is visual, but I'll say, okay, So what is the voice telling you? Well, it's telling me blah, 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 blah. Okay. Do you get a visual of what it might look like? Sometimes people say, well, it's weird. It's like, it's a guy with a top hat on, or it's a green blob, or it's like a fire hydrant or whatever. And I'm like, whatever. Yeah. They're talking to you. So give it attention, turn toward it. If you can't see it with a visual, just get a sense of it. What does it want to say? I'll say, close your eyes, listen to it, look squarely at it, get a sense of what it wants to say to you. And from our adult chair, I would say, hey, I want to hear from you. What do you want to share with me? And we let that voice go, let it ruminate, and but be present with it. Okay. Again, in my experience of after all these years, that voice starts to get quiet because it has your attention, because that voice is coming from the ego, and the ego's job is to keep you alive and safe. So it's trying to get your attention to tell you something's wrong. From my adult, though, I'm going to listen to it and go, thank you. I hear what you're saying. Thank you very much. I got it. And then the voice gets quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so powerful. I do this all the time with my clients. Yeah. So turn toward that voice and really listen to it. Sometimes I invite people to journal. I'll say, why don't you journal out if they're not visual? I'll say, put a pen in your hand and let the pen be that voice.
Right.
Write it out. And they'll go, God, I wrote out 10 pages. And then the rumination stopped. I'm like, yeah, because you paid attention to it.
Right.
So we have to stop as human beings turning away from ourselves and turning toward ourselves, because we have all the answers within.
Awesome. Thank you. I love that. I really appreciate that. That's one thing that I think so many people get stuck with, is in that moment, right? Of how they can get up out of it, but getting up out of it is being in it, right? You got to be in it before you're out. Right?
We want to go through it.
Right.
And we can't go through it unless we turn toward it and go squarely in. We got to sit right in it. And I promise, we will fall through it and we land in a bed of daisies.
Yay! Awesome.
It's like a trap door. It's like, just sit in it. Just sit in it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's a really nice, practical application that we can all use in our lives when we're stuck in that spot. So let's talk a little bit about trust. So obviously it's a kind of a no-brainer that if someone has had experiences of maybe relationships not working out based on someone leaving you for somebody else, or a betrayal or something like that, how do we learn to trust again if that's been our experience?
What I find with trust is that we have to first start with the trust of self. So it's like our inner parts don't trust anymore. It's like, I can't trust you. So what do I need to do first? I got to learn how to trust again myself, my choices, my decisions. Because what happens is, if I break it down in these 3 chairs again, my little inner child who's 0 to 6 years old is shaking in her boots. Like, I don't want to trust. I'm terrified. I'm going to get hurt again. All of these things. So what I do with people is I'll say, okay, let's get your healthy adult, the person you are today. So for me, I'd say, okay, I'm 51 years old. It's 2019. I say this to myself. This is the date. It's Michelle. Let me connect with that inner child part that says that she can't trust. And I'll say, you know what? And I'll have a dialogue with her. I'll say, I know you're terrified to trust, but you know what? You can trust me. I will be here with you. And I'm not kidding you, Andy. Like, my whole body just relaxes. Like, oh, because again, this just happened to me like 2 weeks ago and 6 months ago in business. It's been awful, but I've worked with myself through these great, true, they were betrayals, all time betrayals. So, but I had to work with myself. I'm like, I know that if I can trust myself, then I can edge my way out and maybe trust one more person. And in that adolescent, it's like this all or nothing, like I can never trust anybody ever again. And in the adult chair, we live with fact and truth. So I'll ask my clients, okay, is there anybody in the entire planet that you think, after I connect them with the adult and the child, I'll say, okay, now, and they'll calm down. I'll say, is there anyone on the planet that you feel like you can trust even a little teeny tiny bit? Can you put like your big toe in the pool? Instead of jumping in all the way, let's put the big toe in. They'll say, well, no, I can't. Like, okay, 100%, you cannot trust anybody. And they'll say, well, the lady at the grocery store has always been very nice to me. And I'm like, fine. Can we trust that she's going to, when you go to the grocery store, so I'll start with like little simple people like that.
Right.
And then we build. And what I find is when we can regain that trust with ourselves, it's much easier to extend out into the world and start trusting again. Mm-hmm. And it's always about a choice. And, in the adolescent chair, this egoic part of us, I call it, we carry around our cement suitcase with us. I'm like, we got to let go of what happened in the past. And when we take it with us, it's like dragging around a cement suitcase. It's very heavy. So when we can let that go, then we can start moving on. And that's also when we can start to trust. Like, if you're going to bring a cement suitcase into my office and start talking about the betrayal that happened, 10 years ago, 5 years, whatever, 1 year ago, it's like, it's pretty hard to move on if you've got all the betrayals sitting right on your lap at the same time. So you have to make that choice to move on and then start to retrust. So it's really a process of letting that go when it's time. I'm never pushing it. And then embracing trust within the self and then others.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Always bringing it back to us, right?
It is. It really is. I mean, it begins with us. I say that to my clients. I'm like, I want you to hold this mantra for yourself. It's all about me. And it's not selfish, because if I don't know what's going on with my emotions and my thoughts, and I'm putting it on you, like if I say, okay, Andy, you need to be responsible for my thoughts and emotions, like, we'll never be happy. We'll never be healthy.
Right.
So we got to go back to ourselves and really connect into the self.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we find, love and forgiveness and trust and all of these things. So, and the ability to move on.
Right.
If I've got me, then I can move on by myself. You know what I mean?
Right. That leads me to the topic of self-abandonment, because if you abandon yourself, then it's going to be challenging for you to move forward. Is that something you talk about with,
Oh, yeah.
You're basically talking about that, I guess, with like the inner child and stuff too, right? Like a lot of us
Yeah.
ourselves.
Oh my gosh, totally. With a lot of people, I'll say, okay, let's, close your eyes, go inside of yourself and tell me, where do you see or feel your inner child? And many people will be like, I don't. Like, it's black in there. I don't see anything. And that to me is self-abandonment, because at some point along the way, we learn to disconnect from ourselves, and that's self-abandonment. So I'll actually take my little chair that's in my office and I'll put it outside in the hallway and close the door. And I'm like, does that feel good to you? They're like, no, I want that part back. So we have to, it's a reconnection. And that part is within us somewhere, but maybe the inner child is hiding or afraid or whatever. So I work to bring that part back. And I've got a lot of guided meditations that I send people home with. And I'm just like, okay, let's really cultivate that connection again. Then the self-abandonment starts to fade away and they don't feel that way. It literally is like, oh, it's gone. I don't feel that way anymore. I feel so much better about myself. I feel connected to myself.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So here's a question that dives a little bit more into like abandonment as it relates to let's say romantic partnerships. So, most people in the world of therapy I can't remember what it's called, right? But if you have an experience of, it's a repetition. If you have an experience of abandonment as a child, dad leaves mom, something like that, then oftentimes we can find ourselves recreating that same thing in our own romantic relationships and just repeating this pattern over and over again. And so first of all, can you share a little bit about that? Like, does that come up in your practice? And also how do we not do that? How do we become aware of that and like stop that cycle?
Well, you just said the key word, which is awareness. And when people come in and they're like, gosh, my dad did this to my mom and now my husband just did the same thing to me. And I'm like, okay, so what does that tell you? Or this has happened 4 times to me. And they're like, I'll say, does it feel like a pattern to you? And they're like, yeah. And I'll say, okay, what happened way in the past? And they'll say, oh yeah, this happened to my whomever. It absolutely does happen. And the key is, the first step, in my opinion, is awareness. Mm-hmm. It's awareness, because people think it's random in the universe. Like, I don't know, it just happened. It keeps happening. I'm like, right. But there's something inside of us, we have all these unconscious beliefs and wounding, from our past that is actually creating our current reality. It just is. It's like attracts like. So if I have abandonment within me, people abandon me. Let's just pretend I have a statement, people abandon me, or I'm not good enough, so people leave, something like that. Then I'm going to continue to repetitively have people in my life that leave me over and over and over again, or betray me over and over again. So we need to go within, raise the awareness and say, okay, this is a problem for me. So that's the first step. Mm-hmm. Acknowledge it, have awareness around it. I didn't say self-blame or judge the self. It's just about holding awareness. Like, okay, where could have this come from? I do shadow work with people. We're going inside, we're looking at finding that pattern, finding the root of that pattern of that betrayal or that abandonment. And I'll say, oh, so this did happen with your mom and your dad. Yes. Okay. And then again, we're going in and we're doing some shadow work around it. And then what I find, once you get to that root, everything starts to change, and you acknowledge it and you own it and you look at the positives that came with this whole root of abandonment. And then it changes, it shifts us on the inside. So then we can stop attracting that. When we keep creating these realities or whatever you want to call it, or circumstances in our lives, it's an opportunity for us to go inside again and find out what is going on within me that I'm creating it. What pattern or unconscious belief do I have within myself that I keep creating all of this? So again, you have to have that awareness, and you go deep into the self and find out where it is. And then the changes start happening on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Did I answer that question?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
So here's another one for you. This is something, again, I often bring my own personal, right, like stories I've told myself, but I know so many people deal with this. And you mentioned like perfectionism being part of what your adolescent share, right?
Yeah.
Telling you and stuff. So one of the things that I've had this like story running in my history, and something I'm always aware of is like, if I don't do it right or I don't do it perfect, then people will leave, right? And I don't know where it started, right? Obviously something childhood related, right? But that's been like this pattern of like the story that comes up around making a mistake equals abandonment, and I don't know. I thought I'd just throw that out there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So any suggestions for people who like get into that perfectionistic mindset?
Yeah. So I'll do a lot of inquiring around that belief, because it's all coming from that adolescent chair. It's like, well, if I don't do this, so I'll say, so if you're not a perfectionist and you don't get that perfect, what will happen? Because oftentimes we hold these beliefs, and this happened with a client a couple of days ago, and I said, and she's exactly like you're saying, and I said, so what will happen if you're not a perfectionist? She goes, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you have a belief around this that's driving your life.
Right.
So what we need to do is slow down, because in the adolescent chair, it's very quick. The energy moves fast. The brain is always sorting to keep us safe, so it doesn't slow down. So in the adult, it's a little slower and it's more present. I'll say, so slow down. What's going to happen to you if you're not perfect? And we chunk it down. With NLP, we learn to chunk things down, like, and the bottom of it was, well, I'll die. It's like, well, if I'm not a perfectionist, then, my boss is going to fire me. If my boss fires me, I'm not going to have money. If I don't have money, and you just keep going down, then my boyfriend's going to kick me out of his house, and and we go down, and the very bottom is death. I go, okay, so if you're not a perfectionist, you're going to die. And my client the other day said, well, I'm not going to die. And I'm like, feel the truth. But this is the thing. If we don't anchor everything in the body, we're literally playing a ping pong game in the mind. Left side, right side, left hemisphere, right hemisphere. So it's like we try to figure things out. So when I work with my clients, I'll say, so drop it into your body. So is it true that if you're not a perfectionist, you're going to die? And she started laughing. And I said, no. I said, bring it down what I call below the chin and feel that truth in your body. And she's like, well, that's just not true. And again, in the adult, we live in fact and truth. I'll say, okay, so what is true? It was an awesome session. And she's like, well, maybe I don't need to be as much of a perfectionist. And again, it's just a lot of inquiring around that belief to loosen it, because it's like got like lockjaw. And I was like, I have to be a perfectionist or else.
Right.
Yeah. And then,
No.
and of course you can inquire like, what happened in childhood that might have led to this? If you don't, sometimes you don't even know what happened, but you just start asking a lot of questions to yourself, and then it starts to loosen. But you got to drop it in below the chin, or else it doesn't shift. The mind is not going to shift it for you. You got to bring it down into the body.
Right. Yeah, no, and it's so true. And I can totally relate to your client, right? Like laughing at it, because you start to uncover it. You're like, wait a second. Okay, so I've been telling myself this thing. So wait, if I'm not perfect or I make a mistake, I'm going to die. Yeah, no, that's actually, no, I'm still alive. I've made some mistakes. I'm still alive. So that can't be, right? Like for me, right? Like I've made a lot of mistakes over the last 9 years of being with Ike, and he hasn't abandoned me yet,
Exactly. And that's the other thing we want to do is find truth, just like you said. Like, I've made mistakes, but Ike did not abandon me.
Right.
Feel that below the chin, like, oh, and the whole body gets soft. It's like,
right.
Well, maybe it is okay that I make little mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Ike didn't leave me. So it's again, feeling it. It's like, oh, wow. Anchor, 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 and then everything starts to change in the programming. I think about our programming because all these programs are in the unconscious mind. Like they're just sitting in this adolescent chair, driving us to be so perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you drop it below the chin, everything starts to uncoil, unwind, and then the programs start to totally shift and they can fade or a new program goes in that's positive. It's pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was
Yeah,
great.
yeah, of course.
So we're running a little low on time, and I want to ask you one more question before we dive into the button below this video. So first of all, we're doing a challenge. I didn't tell you this because I like to put people on the spot. As
Oh,
a result
geez.
of this event, we're doing a challenge for our viewers. So like each interview we do, I'm asking if you had like one exercise or one thing that our viewers could do to help them, right, break free from their abandonment or betrayal issues, what would it be?
I would say the first thing that comes to my mind is, oh my gosh, I have like 10 things. You just got me to say one?
Well, you could say a couple of your favorite. We could do two, I guess,
All
people could
right.
choose.
Okay. So what can your viewers do right now to help them through their abandonment and betrayal? Number one, sit down, put your feet on the floor, just invite the bottoms of your feet to open up. Notice what's coming up through your feet. That's grounding us, and really sit down and let the chair or the couch support you and let yourself just drift, let your awareness, your consciousness drift into your body and allow those stuck emotions, thoughts, beliefs to start loosening. So if you've got that knot in your stomach, if you're so darn angry, let yourself be angry. Just notice where it is, even in the body. If you feel like crying, let it out. If you feel like getting mad, let it out. But tune into yourself and be with everything that's in there so it can start to move and you can start to shift and transform. Part two would be, remember to ask yourself, this is one thing that over the years, people in my Facebook group, like everybody says, oh my God, that changed my life. Become story busters. Okay? Because we live with so many stories and assumptions that are not true. And I read a statistic so long ago, I can't remember where I read it. And I really believe it's true that 97% of our stories and assumptions are not true.
So yes.
97. That's a lot.
Uh-huh.
Yet we'll sit there and go, he did this because, blah, 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 it goes on and on and on. And then when we find truth, it's like, well, that wasn't even true.
Right.
Now, sometimes, of course, we are accurate with our stories and assumptions, but most of the time we're not. So stop allowing yourself to go into story and assumption and live with fact and truth. So if you don't know what fact and truth is, you go and you gather information in order now to get that fact and the truth about whatever you're ruminating about or whatever you're lost in story about. People get lost in stories for days or years. It's but when we become story busters, it's a total game changer. And people say, God, I don't have as much drama in my life. And I resolve these issues so much faster because I figured that most of what I'm saying and thinking is inaccurate. I'm like, exactly.
Yes.
So especially with a betrayal, man, we
can
go into serious stories and assumptions or an abandonment. Well, they did it because of this and that and the other. Is it true? Like, is that true? And if you don't know that it's true, then stop thinking it because you don't know what's true. But again, the ego wants to figure it out and keep us safe. And it's like, nope. So from our adult chair, we will go into fact and truth and become story busters. So those are the two things.
I love it. Thank you.
Really, really powerful things, of course. Yeah.
Yes. And please, everyone take that on and do these two exercises and share in our Facebook group for the event and what results you got out of it, how you feel based on it, and let us know how it went for you. So thanks for that, Michelle. All right. So there is a button below this video right now, and it actually takes you over to a book that Michelle wrote. So please tell us about this book.
Oh boy. I wrote a really gigantic book on the adult chair and my adolescent chair got impatient. It was like a 300-page book. And I'm like, I really want to get this out right away because so many people kept saying, is there a book on this? And excuse me, there's no book because this is my model and it's based on 25 years of what I've discovered for myself over the years. So it's not like I took this from anyone else. So I was in a hurry to get it out. So I did write a book. It's a shorter book. It's like 70 pages, I think. But it's all about the adult chair. It really breaks down what this model is. It's a really fun, easy read. but I give you ideas again on how you can apply this model right away. And that's what the whole book is about. People love the book. They think it's a great book. And the big giant one is still is to come maybe next year.
Right.
So yeah, so that's
you.
what the book is about. It's a guide to loving yourself and living authentically using the adult chair model.
Excellent.
It's all about the whole model.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And you gave us so many awesome tidbits about the model and showed us so many things through the interview. So if you guys want to dive deeper with Michelle's work and really take on, applying this model to your past experiences, if you're stuck with, stories of abandonment and betrayal and having a hard time moving through it, I highly recommend you check that out. So buttons right below. Are there any last insights? Anything else you want to share before we hop off, Michelle?
Oh, geez. Just remember, stay connected to yourself. And we do that by, I always use this visual of we got to know what's going on in the mind and I got to know what's going into my body. So the mind, again, is the adolescent, right? It's the egoic, the mind, the brain. And then the body would be the inner child where our thoughts and our feelings and vulnerability and intimacy and spontaneity, they're all there. So when we connect those two, then we can live from our adult chair. But we've got to stay connected to ourselves. And most of us do this. We disconnect, blame, all these other things. We want to stay connected to ourselves. That's, again, a big takeaway. So
awesome. Thank
yes.
you.
You're
you
welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. It was fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're amazing. And I love your model and found it so helpful for my own life. And I hope everyone did as well. So I appreciate your time and taking the time to do this. And
yeah, of course.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into Michelle's interview. And here once again is to our journey to breaking free from abandonment and betrayal. Bye, everybody. Hey everyone, I just got off a great interview with Michelle Chalfant. I loved this woman's interview. I really enjoyed her work in the adult chair, this whole model that she's created and worked with, tens of thousands of people across the world for several years with. I love this model. I think it's really helpful. I felt that the 3 chairs and gives you really a nice tangible thing to think about, whether you're actually using those 3 chairs in your house or something like that, or moving around and moving your body to get yourself out of that egoic adolescent chair when you're in it. I thought this was really helpful. So a couple things I wanted to touch on was when I asked Michelle about, what do you do when you're stuck? Let's say you've had an experience of being abandoned as a child, whether that's physically or emotionally or a betrayal or something like that. And you get really stuck in that spot and your mind is just chiming away, right? That motor is churning and spouting out all sorts of really disempowering thoughts. And it's really challenging to get out of that space. So what I really loved, the suggestion that she gave for us was turn towards it. Right? Don't medicate it with alcohol. Don't, avoid it. Don't push it down. Don't stuff it down. Actually turn toward it because, she gave the analogy of being like a child, right? A child that wants your attention just gets louder and louder and louder, right? And if you don't give it that attention, it keeps getting louder and louder and louder. So if you give it attention, turn towards it and actually listen to it. Okay, got it. So you're telling me I suck. You're telling me I don't deserve to be happy. You're telling me that everyone's going to leave me. You're telling me that I must be perfect. You're telling me all of these not helpful, disempowering things. Then you're like, okay, got it. Thanks for sharing. Totally hear you. And maybe you need to journal this stuff out and start doing some free writing and really get these thoughts that are churning in your mind out onto paper or out onto a computer screen or something like that. Just get it out of you. And then, what she says is then it gets quieter. So I thought this was really helpful. This is something that I am going to apply in my life because I certainly get stuck in my moments of dealing with my own abandonment issues. And I loved that this was a really practical way for us to, turn towards this and then move through it. Right? Feel the emotions, listen to those thoughts, allow it to actually be there and, sit with it. And then it will come up out of you, right? You're actually going through it. So I thought this was really helpful. I also wanted to mention the 2 challenges that Michelle gave us. So one of them was to really ground yourself, right? She said, sit down, put your feet on the floor, really let your awareness drift into your body and really kind of hone in on those stuck emotions or those stuck beliefs in your body and allow them to start loosening, right? So once again, you're tuning into yourself so that those emotions, those beliefs can shift and transform. So that was her number 1. And her number 2 was become a story buster. She mentioned a statistic that I can't remember where she said she thought she'd heard it, but that 90% of the time the stories we tell ourselves aren't true, right? So if we were sitting in our adult chair, as she says it, right, we would be looking at facts. We'd actually be telling the truth about things as opposed to making assumptions or not questioning, right, the thoughts and the stories that we're telling ourselves. So become a story buster in your life. So take on these 2 challenges. Feel free to share about your experiences of those in the Facebook group so that we can all help each other. And take a look at her book. So again, the button is below this interview if you'd like to check out Michelle's book on the adult chair. And thank you again so much for tuning in and being with us on this event. And we'll see you on the next interview.